Major Laura Hayes had 15 minutes to evacuate her Apache squadron before enemy forces overran forward operating Base Sierra. The evacuation order was crystal clear: leave immediately, no exceptions. But as she counted her pilots boarding the transport helicopters, one cockpit remained empty. Warrant Officer Danny Martinez hadn't returned from reconnaissance. In 15 years of military service, Laura had never left a soldier behind. She wasn't about to start now. Some promises are worth breaking orders for. Before we dive into Laura's impossible decision, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your state or country in the comments below. Let's see how far this story of courage travels around the world. The radio crackled to life at 0600 hours, cutting through the morning quiet of forward operating Base Sierra. Major Laura Hayes stood in the operations tent, coffee mug in hand, watching the sun rise over the Afghan mountains. She'd seen this view 1,000 times, but something felt different today. All squadron commanders, report to comms immediately. Colonel Thompson's voice carried the weight of bad news. Laura set down her mug and walked to the radio station. Around her, the base was coming alive. Mechanics rolled Apache helicopters out of their protective hangars. Ground crews ran final checks on weapons systems. Everything looked normal, but the urgency in Thompson's voice told a different story. She keyed the microphone. Sierra 6, this is Hawk Leader. Go ahead, sir. Laura, I need you to prep your squadron for immediate evacuation. Intelligence reports indicate a major enemy offensive heading your way. ETA 2 hours, maybe less. Laura's grip tightened on the radio handset. She'd been commanding Apache squadrons for 8 years. She knew when something didn't add up. Sir, our reconnaissance flights yesterday showed minimal enemy activity in this sector. Things change fast out here, Major. You know that better than anyone. Through the tent opening, Laura watched her pilots emerging from their quarters. 3 of them headed toward the mess hall, joking about something she couldn't hear. Young faces, most of them. Kids who trusted her to bring them home. What's the extraction timeline, Colonel? Transport helicopters inbound. You have 90 minutes to secure all aircraft and personnel. No exceptions, no delays. Laura pulled out her personnel roster. For Apache crews, 12 people total. Her eyes stopped on one name, Warrant Officer Danny Martinez. The kid from Texas who always volunteered for the tough missions. She'd watched him grow from a nervous pilot into one of her best. Sir, I show Warrant Officer Martinez on solo reconnaissance. He's not due back for another 40 minutes. Static filled the radio for several seconds. When Thompson's voice returned, it carried an edge. Major, you will evacuate all available personnel within the timeline. That's a direct order. Understood, sir. But what about Hayes? Thompson's voice cut through her words like a blade. One pilot isn't worth risking the entire squadron. You have your orders. Laura stared at the radio. In 15 years of military service, she'd never left a soldier behind. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her that before she could walk. You bring everyone home, or you don't come home yourself. She walked outside and found Chief Mechanic Rodriguez supervising the aircraft preparation. The morning air carried the smell of aviation fuel and desert dust. Chief, what's Danny's status? Rodriguez consulted his tablet. Martinez checked in 40 minutes ago. All systems green, heading back from Sector 7. Should be wheels down in 20 minutes, maybe 30 if he's being careful. Any radio contact since then? Negative, ma'am. But that's standard procedure for his route. Too many mountains for good comms. Laura nodded and walked to the flight line. Her Apache sat ready, weapons loaded, fuel topped off. She'd flown this bird through 3 deployments. Every scratch on its armor told a story. Every mission brought her people home safe. Sergeant Williams jogged up to her, tablet in hand. Ma'am, transport helicopters are 30 minutes out. Ground crews are prepping the birds for transport mode. Good. What about our personnel count? 11 accounted for. Martinez still out on recon. Laura looked toward the mountains where Danny was flying. Somewhere out there, a 24-year-old pilot was following orders, doing his job, trusting that his commander would be there when he needed her. She thought about Danny's last conversation with her. 2 days ago, he'd asked about flight school recommendations for his younger sister. He'd shown Laura a picture of the girl graduating high school back in San Antonio. Same smile as Danny's, same determined eyes. The radio in her flight suit crackled. Hawk Leader, this is base operations. Transport ETA 25 minutes. Confirm all personnel ready for extraction. Laura keyed her radio. Base ops, this is Hawk Leader. 11 souls accounted for. 1 pilot still inbound from reconnaissance. Copy that, Hawk Leader. Colonel Thompson wants to speak with you immediately. Laura walked back to the operations tent. Through the radio static, Thompson's voice came through clear and cold. Major, I'm going to ask you once. Are you planning to follow orders? Laura looked at Danny's empty bed through the tent opening. His flight gear hung on its hook, waiting for him to return. On his footlocker sat a framed photo of his family back home. Sir, with respect, no pilot gets left behind on my watch. The radio went quiet. When Thompson spoke again, his voice carried the finality of a closing door. Hayes, you will evacuate with your squadron. That's a direct order. Martinez knew the risks when he volunteered for reconnaissance. Laura turned off the radio and walked outside. The transport helicopters were visible now, black dots against the morning sky, growing larger by the minute. Laura walked to the tactical planning table inside the operations tent. Maps cover the surface, marked with flight paths and enemy positions. She found Danny's reconnaissance route traced in red ink across the mountainous terrain of Sector 7. The transport helicopters grew louder overhead. Through the tent opening, she watched her pilots loading their gear. Sergeant Williams stood near the landing zone, clipboard in hand, counting heads like a school teacher on a field trip. Chief Rodriguez, Laura called out. The veteran mechanic appeared at her shoulder, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. Yes, ma'am. I need an honest assessment. Can my Apache fly solo? Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. He'd worked on helicopters for 22 years. He knew what solo meant in this context. Ma'am, the bird's designed for a 2-man crew. Pilot and gunner. Flying solo means you're doing both jobs. I didn't ask if it was easy, Chief. I asked if it was possible. Rodriguez glanced toward the flight line where Laura's Apache sat ready. Technically, yes. The pilot can control weapons systems from the front seat. But you'll be flying blind on your 6 o'clock. No one watching your back. Laura studied Danny's flight path on the map. His route took him through a narrow valley between 2 mountain ridges. Good cover from ground-based radar, but dangerous if things went wrong. Only one way in, one way out. How long to prep the bird for solo configuration? 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if we're careful about it. One of Laura's pilots, Captain Morrison, entered the tent. Ma'am, Colonel Thompson's on the radio. He wants to know why you're not at the landing zone. Laura looked at Morrison. The young officer had 2 kids back home in North Carolina. A wife who worked as a school nurse. Morrison trusted her judgment completely, never questioned her decisions. Morrison, I need you to take charge of the evacuation. Get everyone on those transports. What about you, ma'am? Laura folded Danny's flight plan and slipped it into her breast pocket. I'm going to bring Martinez home. Morrison's face went pale. Ma'am, that's not what Colonel Thompson ordered. I know exactly what the Colonel ordered. Laura picked up her flight helmet from the table. But I also know what's right. Rodriguez stepped closer. Major, if you take that bird solo and something goes wrong, there's no backup. No rescue mission. The transports will be gone. Then I better not let anything go wrong. Laura walked to her Apache. The morning sun reflected off its armored cockpit. She'd flown this aircraft through 3 deployments, 47 combat missions. Every bolt, every rivet, every system was familiar to her. Rodriguez followed, his tool bag bouncing against his leg. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something directly. Are you planning to disobey orders?" Laura stopped walking. Around them, the base buzzed with evacuation activity. Soldiers loaded equipment into transport helicopters. Mechanics secured aircraft for transport. Everyone following orders, doing their jobs, trusting the system. "Chief, 3 months ago, Martinez pulled 2 of our guys out of a crash site under heavy fire. He could have followed orders and stayed back. Instead, he risked everything to bring them home. That's different, ma'am. That was a rescue mission. So is this." Rodriguez opened his tool bag and pulled out a wrench. "Well then, we better make sure this bird is perfect." They worked in silence for several minutes. Rodriguez adjusted the solo flight configuration while Laura ran through her pre-flight checklist. She tested weapons systems, navigation equipment, communications gear. Everything functioned normally. Captain Morrison appeared at the helicopter's side. "Ma'am, the transports are loaded. Colonel Thompson is demanding you board immediately." Laura climbed into the pilot's seat. The familiar smell of aviation fuel and electronics surrounded her. Through the cockpit glass, she could see the transport helicopters preparing for takeoff. "Morrison, tell the colonel I'll be along shortly." "Ma'am, he's not going to accept that answer." Laura started the Apache's engines. The turbines whined to life, building power. "Then tell him I'm conducting a final security sweep of the base." Morrison hesitated. "Ma'am, that would be lying to a superior officer." "No, Captain. That would be buying time for a fellow soldier." The rotor blades began turning overhead. Laura ran through her engine checks, watching temperatures and pressures climb to operational levels. Everything looked good. Rodriguez appeared at her cockpit window. He held up a small piece of paper and pressed it against the glass. Laura could see handwriting on it. She opened the window. "What's that, Chief?" "Letter for my wife. Just in case." Rodriguez folded the paper and handed it to her. "Ma'am, if you don't come back, they'll court-martial you posthumously." Laura tucked the letter into her flight suit. "Rodriguez, if I don't come back, make sure my daughter knows I kept my promise to never leave a soldier behind." The transport helicopters lifted off in formation, carrying her squadron to safety. Laura watched them disappear over the mountain ridge, black dots against the blue sky. She keyed her radio to Danny's frequency. Static filled her headphones. Somewhere in those mountains, a young pilot was flying home, trusting that his commander would be there when he arrived. Laura pulled power and felt the Apache lift off the ground. The base fell away below her as she turned towards Sector 7. Laura kept the Apache 50 feet above the desert floor, flying between sand dunes and rock formations. At this altitude, ground-based radar couldn't track her movement. The downside was simple: one mistake, one moment of lost focus, and she'd become a crater in the sand. The mountains of Sector 7 rose ahead like jagged teeth against the morning sky. Danny's reconnaissance route took him through a valley between 2 peaks, following an old riverbed that stayed hidden from most observation posts. Her radio crackled with distant transmissions. She caught fragments of conversations from base operations, other aircraft, ground units scattered across the region. Everyone sounded busy, focused, unaware that Major Laura Hayes was flying an unauthorized mission into hostile territory. "Hawk 6, this is base operations. Confirm your position." Laura's hand hovered over the radio. Base operations expected her to be aboard the transport helicopters with her squadron. In 10 minutes, maybe 15, someone would notice she wasn't there. She switched to Danny's frequency instead. "Ranger 27, this is Hawk Leader." "Radio check." Static filled her headphones. Danny's Apache should have been within radio range by now if he was following his planned route home. Laura checked her navigation display. She was 20 minutes from his last known position. The terrain below changed from desert sand to rocky outcroppings. Laura pulled the Apache into a climb, following the contours of the mountainside. Flying this low required constant attention. The helicopter's rotor wash kicked up dust and debris, reducing visibility. Through her headphones, she heard a new voice on the radio. "All units, be advised. Enemy activity reported in Sector 7. Multiple ground positions, possible anti-aircraft weapons." Laura's grip tightened on the flight controls. Enemy forces in Danny's operational area wasn't good news. She increased airspeed, pushing the Apache harder toward the mountains. The valley entrance appeared ahead, a narrow gap between two ridgelines. Laura had studied this terrain on satellite images, but seeing it in person was different. The walls rose steeply on both sides, creating natural cover but also limiting escape routes. She keyed her radio again. "Ranger 27, Hawk Leader. If you can hear this transmission, respond immediately." Nothing but static. Laura entered the valley, flying between walls of brown rock that climbed hundreds of feet above her. The Apache shadow raced along the valley floor below. Her fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. Enough for the search and the flight home, but not much margin for error. 2 miles into the valley, she saw the first sign of trouble. Smoke rose from behind a rock formation, thin and black against the blue sky. Laura banked left and flew around the outcropping. Danny's Apache lay crumpled in a dry riverbed, its main rotor blades twisted and broken. The aircraft had come down hard but relatively level. No fire, no explosion. The cockpit appeared intact. Laura circled the crash site, scanning for movement. She spotted Danny in the front seat of the downed helicopter, his helmet visible through the damaged canopy. He wasn't moving. "Danny, this is Hawk Leader. Can you hear me?" She switched to emergency frequency and tried again. "Ranger 27, this is your commander. Respond if you can." A weak voice crackled through the static. "Hawk Leader? Ma'am, is that really you?" Relief flooded through Laura's chest. "Danny, I see you down there. What's your status?" "Left leg's pinned under the instrument panel. Some kind of head injury, but I'm conscious." "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" "I thought the base was evacuating." Laura flew another circle around the crash site. The surrounding terrain looked empty, but appearances meant nothing in this business. "We'll discuss my travel plans later. Right now, I need to know about enemy activity in your area." "Ma'am, that's why I was trying to get home fast. I spotted at least 30 enemy fighters moving through these mountains. They've got heavy weapons, anti-aircraft missiles. This whole valley is crawling with them." Laura checked her fuel gauge again. The round trip back to base would leave her running on fumes. "Danny, can you move at all?" "Negative. I'm stuck tight. And ma'am, there's something else. I think they knew I was coming. This felt like an ambush." Through her cockpit window, Laura spotted movement on the eastern ridge. Sunlight reflected off something metallic. She banked hard right and dove toward the valley floor. "Danny, stay quiet. We've got company." A streak of white smoke rose from the ridgeline, followed by the distinctive whistle of a rocket-propelled grenade. Laura pulled the Apache into a sharp climb, feeling the G-forces push her into her seat. The explosion bloomed behind her, close enough to rattle the aircraft's frame. Shrapnel pinged off the armored hull. "They've got me bracketed, ma'am. Multiple positions on both ridges. I count at least 3 RPG teams." Laura flew a defensive pattern, staying low and fast, using the terrain for cover. Her weapons systems showed ready status. 30mm cannon, 70 rockets, enough firepower to level a small building. But 30 enemy fighters with anti-aircraft weapons was different math entirely. "Danny, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to extract you, but I need to know exactly how you're pinned." The instrument panel collapsed when we hit. "My left leg is trapped from the knee down. I can't reach the manual release from my restraint system." Another RPG streaked past Laura's aircraft, this one from the western ridge. They had her in a crossfire now. She dove toward the valley floor and flew directly over Danny's position. "Danny, can you see any way to get yourself free?" "Negative, ma'am. I've been working on it for 2 hours. The metal's twisted tight. I'd need cutting tools or a hydraulic jack." Laura pulled up and away from the crash site as more enemy fire erupted from the ridgelines. 3 more smoke trails rose from different positions. They weren't just shooting at her randomly anymore. They were coordinating their attacks. She keyed her radio. "Danny, I need you to tell me something. How did they know exactly where to wait for you?" Laura flew evasive maneuvers while waiting for Danny's answer. Another RPG streaked past her cockpit, close enough that she could see the fins spinning on the warhead. The enemy fighters were getting better at predicting her flight path. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something," Danny's voice crackled through the radio. "Yesterday's reconnaissance mission wasn't routine. I was tracking unusual supply movements through these mountains. Heavy trucks, military equipment, stuff that didn't match normal enemy patterns." Laura banked hard left, using a rock outcropping for cover. "What kind of equipment?" "American-made weapons, ma'am. M4 rifles, ammunition crates, even some communications gear that looked like our own. I took photos of everything." "Photos?" "Yes, ma'am. Digital files on my aircraft's recording system. I was planning to deliver them to intelligence when I got back to base." Laura's mind raced. American weapons in enemy hands could mean several things. Captured equipment, black market sales, or something worse. Much worse. "Danny, where exactly did you see this equipment?" "About 3 miles north of my current position. There's a cave system built into the mountain wall. They've got it set up like a supply depot. Hundreds of crates, maybe thousands." Another explosion erupted near Laura's aircraft, this one close enough to spray rock fragments across her windscreen. She dove toward the valley floor and leveled off 50 feet above Danny's crashed Apache. "Ma'am, there's something else. I intercepted radio communications while I was observing the supply depot. Someone was giving them detailed information about our flight schedules, our patrol routes, even our evacuation timeline." Laura's blood went cold. "Someone on our side?" "Yes, ma'am. The transmissions were in English. American voices. They knew exactly when I would be flying through this valley." Laura circled the crash site again, her mind working through the implications. If Danny was right, someone with access to classified information was feeding intelligence to enemy forces. Someone who knew American military procedures, someone with authorization to access flight plans and operational schedules. "Danny, did you recognize any of the voices?" Static filled the radio for several seconds. When Danny's voice returned, it sounded weaker. "Ma'am, I think my head injury is getting worse. Everything's getting fuzzy. But I recorded the communications on my backup system." "What backup system?" "Personal digital recorder. I keep it clipped to my flight vest for situations like this. The intel leak, it's coming from inside our own command structure, ma'am. They wanted me dead before I could report it." Laura felt the pieces falling into place. The sudden evacuation order. Colonel Thompson's insistence that she leave Danny behind. The enemy forces positioned exactly where they needed to be for an ambush. "Danny, I need you to stay with me. Can you access that recording device?" "I'm trying, ma'am. My left arm isn't working right. Give me a minute." Laura flew another defensive pattern while Danny worked to retrieve the evidence. More enemy fighters appeared on the ridgelines. She counted at least 6 RPG positions now, all with clear fields of fire into the valley. "Got it, ma'am. The recorder is damaged but still functional. I'm going to transmit what I can over emergency frequency." "Negative, Danny. Emergency frequency isn't secure. Anyone can monitor those transmissions. Ma'am, if something happens to me, this evidence dies with me. At least on emergency frequency, Other units will hear it. Laura checked her fuel gauge. Half full and dropping steadily. She had maybe 30 minutes of flight time remaining before she'd be forced to land somewhere. Danny, patch the recording through to my aircraft's communication system. I'll encrypt it and transmit directly to Pentagon intelligence. Working on it, ma'am. The connections are damaged, but I think I can make it work. While Danny worked with his equipment, Laura monitored radio traffic from other units in the region. Everything sounded normal. Routine patrol reports, maintenance schedules, status updates. No one seemed aware that a major intelligence breach was occurring in their midst. Ma'am, I've got partial audio ready. The quality is poor, but you should be able to understand it. Laura switched to Danny's frequency and listened. Through heavy static, she heard fragments of conversation. American voices discussing flight schedules, patrol routes, and operational timelines. The voices were giving detailed information about Danny's reconnaissance mission, including his exact flight path and timing. One voice came through clearly: Martinez will be entering Sector 7 at 0545 hours. Standard reconnaissance pattern. He'll be flying solo, no escort. Laura's hands tightened on the flight controls. She recognized the voice immediately. Colonel Thompson. Danny, are you hearing this? Yes, ma'am. That's my commanding officer selling me out to the enemy. Laura felt anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. Emotions could get them both killed. Right now, she needed to think tactically. Danny, can you transfer those files to my aircraft's computer system? I'm trying, ma'am. The data transfer system took damage in the crash. I can send you partial files, but the complete evidence is stored on my personal device. Then we need to get you out of there. Ma'am, with respect, that's not going to happen. I'm pinned tight, enemy forces are closing in, and your fuel situation has to be getting critical. Laura checked her instruments again. Danny was right. She had enough fuel to fly back to base, but not enough to conduct a prolonged rescue operation under fire. Danny, I'm not leaving you here. Ma'am, you have to. This evidence needs to reach the right people. If Thompson is working with enemy forces, he's probably got other people compromised too. You can't trust anyone at base level. More RPG fire erupted from the ridgelines. Laura counted 8 distinct launch positions now. The enemy was bringing in reinforcements, surrounding the valley. Danny, start transmitting everything you can to my aircraft. If we can't get you out physically, at least we can get the evidence to safety. Already working on it, ma'am. But I need to warn you about something else. The evacuation order for our base was probably part of the setup. Thompson needed everyone gone so there'd be no witnesses when I disappeared. Laura's radio crackled with an incoming transmission on command frequency. Hawk Leader, this is base operations. Confirm your location immediately. She ignored the call and focused on Danny. How long do you need to complete the data transfer? 5 minutes, maybe 10. But ma'am, you need to understand something. Once this information gets out, Thompson and his associates are going to know their operation is blown. They'll come after anyone who has this evidence. Including me. Yes, ma'am. Including you. Laura flew another circle around the crash site, watching enemy forces move into position on both ridgelines. They weren't just trying to kill her anymore. They were setting up a trap to make sure neither she nor Danny ever left this valley alive. Laura's fuel gauge showed 20 minutes of flight time remaining. 20 minutes to extract Danny, get him to safety, and expose Colonel Thompson's betrayal. The math didn't work, but she'd never walked away from impossible odds before. Danny, how's that data transfer coming? Almost finished, ma'am. I've got 80% of the files uploaded to your system. The audio recordings are complete. Laura studied the terrain around the crash site. Enemy fighters occupied positions on both ridgelines, creating overlapping fields of fire. Getting close enough to extract Danny would require flying directly into their killing zone. Ma'am, you need to leave now while you still have fuel to reach friendly territory. We've been through this, Danny. Nobody gets left behind. Laura pulled her Apache into a steep climb, gaining altitude above the valley floor. From 500 feet up, she could see the full scope of the enemy positions. 12 RPG teams, maybe more. Heavy machine guns positioned to cover the approaches. This wasn't just an ambush anymore. This was a kill zone. She keyed her radio to Danny's frequency. Danny, I'm going to make one pass to clear the immediate area around your aircraft. When I give you the signal, you pop smoke to mark your exact position. Ma'am, the smoke will give them a perfect target. It'll also give me one. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. Laura armed her weapons systems. 30mm cannon loaded and ready. 70 rockets in the launch pods. She'd have one chance to suppress enough enemy positions to create an opening. She pushed the Apache into a dive, building speed as she descended toward the valley floor. The altimeter unwound rapidly, 400 feet, 300, 200. At 100 feet above ground level, she opened fire. The 30mm cannon roared to life, sending streams of high-explosive rounds into the eastern ridgeline. Rock and debris exploded from the mountainside as her rounds found their targets. She triggered a salvo of rockets at the western ridge, watching the warheads detonate among the enemy positions. Return fire erupted immediately. RPGs streaked through the air around her Apache, their contrails creating white lines against the blue sky. Laura banked hard left, then right, using every evasive maneuver she knew. Danny, pop smoke now. Green smoke billowed up from Danny's crash site, marking his position in the chaos. Laura lined up for her extraction run, flying straight toward the downed aircraft despite the incoming fire. An RPG exploded directly in front of her cockpit, close enough that the blast wave shook the entire aircraft. Warning lights flashed on her instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure dropping. Electrical systems fluctuating. Ma'am, your bird is taking damage. You need to abort. Laura ignored the warnings and continued her approach. She could see Danny clearly now, still trapped in his cockpit, his helmet reflecting the morning sunlight. She flared the Apache and brought it into a hover directly over the crash site. The rotor wash scattered the green smoke and kicked up clouds of dust and debris. Danny, I'm going to set down right next to you. Can you reach your emergency cutting tools? Negative, ma'am. Toolkit is on the other side of the cockpit. I can't reach it with my arm injury. Laura touched down 20 feet from Danny's aircraft, keeping her engines running. She grabbed her personal survival kit and jumped out of her cockpit. Enemy fire erupted from the ridgelines as soon as she hit the ground. Bullets cracked past her head, ricocheting off rocks and metal. She sprinted toward Danny's Apache, staying low. Danny, where exactly are you pinned? She climbed onto the damaged aircraft and peered into the cockpit. Danny's left leg was trapped under a section of collapsed instrument panel. The metal had twisted during the crash, creating a tight grip around his knee. Laura pulled out her emergency cutting tool, a small hydraulic device designed for exactly this situation. She positioned it against the twisted metal and activated the cutting head. Ma'am, they're moving down from the ridges. Ground forces, maybe 20 fighters. Laura looked up and saw enemy soldiers descending the mountain slopes, assault rifles ready. They'd be in effective range within minutes. The cutting tool chewed through the first section of twisted metal. Danny's leg moved slightly, but he was still trapped. Almost got it, Danny. Hold still. More enemy fire poured into their position. Laura heard the distinctive sound of bullets punching through aircraft aluminum. Her Apache's engine was taking hits, but it was still running. She repositioned the cutting tool and made a second cut. The metal gave way completely, freeing Danny's leg. Can you move? Danny tried to shift position and winced. Leg's broken, but I can put some weight on it. Laura helped him climb out of his cockpit. Danny leaned heavily on her shoulder as they made their way toward her Apache. Ma'am, look at your bird. Laura turned and saw the damage for the first time. Bullet holes peppered the fuselage. Hydraulic fluid leaked from multiple punctures. Smoke rose from the engine compartment. Will it fly? It'll fly. Question is whether it'll fly long enough. They reached Laura's Apache as enemy ground forces moved within 100 yards of their position. Laura helped Danny into the gunner's seat, then climbed into the pilot position. She pulled power and felt the helicopter lift off, but something was wrong. The controls felt sluggish, unresponsive. The engine temperature was climbing rapidly. Danny, we've got multiple system failures. I'm not sure how long we can stay airborne. Ma'am, just get us out of this valley. We can worry about landing later. Laura coaxed the damaged Apache higher, fighting with controls that seemed to have a mind of their own. The aircraft shuddered and vibrated, but it climbed. They cleared the valley walls and headed toward friendly territory. Behind them, enemy forces continued firing, but they were out of effective range now. Danny, check your data transfer. Did everything upload to my system? Yes, ma'am. Complete files are now stored on your aircraft's computer. Audio recordings, photographs, everything we need to expose Thompson. Laura's engine temperature gauge climbed into the red zone. Oil pressure was dropping rapidly. She had maybe 5 minutes of flight time before engine failure. Danny, I need you to understand something. This bird isn't going to make it back to base. How far can we get? Laura studied her navigation display and calculated distances. Maybe halfway. There's a forward outpost about 30 miles from here. Small unit, maybe 20 soldiers. Can we trust them? We're about to find out. The Apache's engine began making new sounds, grinding noises that meant metal parts were destroying themselves. Black smoke poured from the exhaust ports. Ma'am, if we go down in hostile territory, then we make sure this evidence gets to the right people before they find us. Laura switched her radio to emergency frequency and began transmitting. Any station, this is Major Laura Hayes, Apache pilot requesting immediate assistance. I have critical intelligence regarding enemy infiltration of American command structure. Static filled her headphones, then a voice responded. Major Hayes, this is Lieutenant Morrison, forward outpost Charlie. We copy your distress call. Morrison. Laura recognized the voice. One of her own pilots who had evacuated with the squadron. Morrison, I need you to patch me through to Pentagon Intelligence immediately. Priority Alpha. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to. The Apache's engine seized completely. The rotor blades began slowing as the aircraft entered auto-rotation. Laura fought to control the Apache as it fell from the sky. Without engine power, the aircraft descended in auto-rotation, the rotor blades spinning freely in the wind. She had maybe 60 seconds to find a landing spot before they hit the ground. Danny, can you see any open terrain ahead? Danny pressed his face against the gunner's window. There's a small clearing about 2 miles northwest. Looks flat enough for an emergency landing. Laura adjusted their glide path toward the clearing. The Apache's controls felt heavy and unresponsive without hydraulic power. Every adjustment required physical strength and careful timing. Morrison, are you still monitoring this frequency? Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. Yes, ma'am. I've got Pentagon Intelligence on standby. They're requesting immediate authentication of your identity. Tell them Major Laura Hayes, service number 77492 Alpha. Commanding Officer of Apache Squadron Delta at Forward Operating Base Sierra. The ground rushed up toward them. Laura could see individual rocks and bushes now. The clearing appeared ahead, a patch of brown earth surrounded by scattered trees. Pentagon Intelligence confirms your identity, ma'am. They're requesting immediate transmission of your evidence. Laura pulled back on the collective, trying to arrest their descent. The Apache hit the ground hard, bounced once, then settled with a grinding sound of twisted metal. Danny, you okay? Still breathing, ma'am. That was some flying. Laura shut down the remaining electrical systems and began uploading Danny's evidence files to Pentagon Intelligence through her secure communication system. The upload progress bar moved slowly across her display screen. Morrison, tell intelligence they're receiving complete audio recordings of Colonel Thompson coordinating with enemy forces. Plus photographic evidence of American weapons in enemy hands. Copy that, ma'am. They're receiving your transmission now. Through her cockpit window, Laura could see dust clouds in the distance. Vehicle movement, heading their direction. Either friendly forces responding to their distress call, or enemy fighters tracking them down. Danny, we've got company approaching from the east. Danny tried to turn in his seat but winced from the pain in his broken leg. Can't tell if they're ours or theirs from this angle. The upload progress bar reached 90% completion. Laura watched the final files transfer to Pentagon intelligence, knowing this evidence would end Colonel Thompson's career and expose his betrayal. Morrison, confirm receipt of all files. Pentagon intelligence confirms complete data package received, ma'am. They're analyzing the audio recordings now. The approaching vehicles came into view. 3 military trucks flying American flags. Laura felt relief wash over her as she recognized the markings of a forward reconnaissance unit. Danny, looks like we're getting a ride home. The truck stopped 50 yards from the crashed Apache. Soldiers jumped out and formed a defensive perimeter around the aircraft. A captain approached Laura's cockpit. Major Hayes? Captain Rodriguez, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. We received orders to extract you and your pilot immediately. Laura opened her cockpit door. Captain, I need secure communication with Pentagon intelligence right now. Yes, ma'am. We've got a satellite uplink in the command vehicle. Captain Rodriguez helped Laura and Danny out of the crashed Apache. Danny leaned heavily on a makeshift crutch one of the soldiers had fashioned from aircraft debris. They reached the command vehicle as Laura's radio crackled with a new transmission. Major Hayes, this is General Patterson, Pentagon intelligence. We've reviewed your evidence. Colonel Thompson is being arrested as we speak. Laura keyed the radio. General, you need to know that Thompson may have other people working with him. The intelligence leak could involve multiple personnel. We're investigating that possibility. Major, I need to ask you directly. Are you prepared to testify about everything you've witnessed? Laura looked at Danny, who nodded. Yes, sir. Both Warrant Officer Martinez and I are prepared to provide complete testimony. Outstanding. Major, you should also know that forward operating base Sierra came under attack 30 minutes ago. Enemy forces overran the facility shortly after the evacuation was completed. Laura felt cold understanding wash over her. General, if we had followed Colonel Thompson's orders and left Danny behind, the enemy would have captured him along with all the evidence of their intelligence operation. Your decision to disobey orders prevented a major security breach. One of Captain Rodriguez's soldiers approached the command vehicle. Sir, we've got incoming helicopters. Medical evacuation for the wounded pilot. Through the vehicle's window, Laura could see 2 Black Hawks approaching their position. Danny would receive proper medical attention, and they would both be transported to a secure facility for debriefing. Danny, how are you holding up? Danny managed a weak smile. Better than I expected, ma'am. Thanks to you. You did the hard work. You discovered the intelligence leak and documented everything. I just flew the taxi service. Ma'am, with respect, you risked your entire career to save my life. That's not taxi service. That's leadership. The medical helicopters touched down nearby. Paramedics rushed toward their position with stretchers and medical equipment. Laura's radio crackled with another transmission. Major Hayes, this is General Patterson again. Based on preliminary analysis of your evidence, we've identified at least 3 other personnel involved in the intelligence leak. Your actions have exposed an entire network of compromised individuals. As paramedics loaded Danny onto a stretcher, he grabbed Laura's arm. Ma'am, what happens now? Now we tell the truth and let the system work the way it's supposed to. Laura climbed aboard one of the Black Hawks as Danny was loaded onto the other. Through the aircraft window, she could see the wreckage of her Apache, the aircraft that had carried them through their impossible mission. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them towards safety and the long process of testimony and investigation that would follow. Laura's radio crackled one final time. "Major Hayes, this is Colonel Morrison." The voice belonged to her former pilot, now apparently promoted. "Ma'am, I wanted you to know that the entire squadron is proud of what you did today." Laura keyed her radio. "Morrison, tell the squadron that we kept our promise. No pilot gets left behind." As the Black Hawk flew toward the horizon, Laura thought about her daughter back home, waiting for news. She thought about Chief Rodriguez and his letter to his wife. She thought about the promise she'd made to never abandon a fellow soldier. Some promises were worth breaking orders for. Some promises were worth risking everything to keep. If Major Hayes' story of courage and sacrifice moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible military stories. What would you have done in Laura's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these tales of heroism.